Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something about silence. See, there's a kind of silence that screams, a kind of quiet that shakes the ground beneath the feet of the very people who once thought they controlled the volume in your life. That silence, that's what happens when you go no contact with a narcissist. And oh, they feel it. Now, don't get it twisted. When you cut the cord, they don't sit back in peace. No, they lean forward in anticipation. Because a narcissist, they got hopes too. Not the kind rooted in love or truth, but in manipulation and ego. When you go no contact with a narcissist, the very first thing they hope for is that you'll be the one to break. They don't just think it's a possibility, they expect it. Because in their world, the game is never truly over. To them, no contact isn't the end. It's just a pause, a test, a delay in their ongoing performance. And deep down, they believe you'll be back. Not because you missed them, not because the love was real, but because they assume they still have power over your mind. A narcissist feeds on control, not just during the relationship, but long after it's over. They want to be the ghost in your thoughts, the shadow behind your choices. So when you go silent, they don't respect it. They study it. They analyze it. They tell themselves, she's angry now. He's just emotional. They'll reach out, give it time. They see your silence as temporary because in their twisted mindset, you still orbit around them. You're not separate, just silent. And they'll test that theory. They might throw out a vague social media post, something they know you'll see, a lyric, a memory, a photo from some shared moment, nothing direct, just enough bait to make you think. They may not contact you, not right away, but they'll stir the water, hoping you bite. Because the narcissist doesn't want to reach out first, that would risk looking vulnerable. Instead, they set the stage so that you initiate, because if you do, they win. That one message, that one, how have you been, is all they need to feel the power shift back in their favor. It's not about love. It never was. It's about control, validation, the sense that they still matter in your world. They want to believe that your silence is a performance, not a decision, that you're waiting for them to come around, that you're still emotionally available, still tied to the narrative they crafted. And if you've broken no contact in the past, even once, they'll hold on to that. They'll treat it like a guarantee that you'll do it again, that no matter how firm you sound, eventually the silence will crack. You see, narcissists operate on the belief that people are possessions, tools, extensions of their ego. So when you take your voice back, when you go no contact, they see it as a temporary rebellion, not a final act of strength. They don't think you can sustain it. They don't think you're capable of walking away for good. That's why they hope, they wait, and they prepare. They imagine you staring at your phone. They count on your loneliness. They bet on your empathy, the very thing they exploited in the first place. They may even recruit flying monkeys, mutual friends, family members, anyone who can check in on their behalf or feed you little breadcrumbs. They've been asking about you. They miss you. Maybe you should talk. It's all part of the setup. Because the moment you engage, the moment you let them know you're still thinking about them, is confirmation that their grip still lingers. And that's all they need, confirmation. Proof that they still have real estate in your mind. Proof that the spell isn't fully broken. Because in the end, what a narcissist fears the most isn't your silence. It's your indifference, your true emotional detachment. That's why when you go no contact, they hope you'll be the first to break. Because if you don't, that means they never had the control they believed they did. When you go no contact with a narcissist, they hope you're suffering. They need to believe that your silence is not strength, But pain feeds their ego to imagine you miserable without them, not just missing them, aching for them. They don't picture you healing, growing, or finding peace. That would mean you found power outside of them, and that's unacceptable in their world. Instead, they build a fantasy where your everyday is filled with regret, loneliness, and longing. It reassures them that they were the center of your universe, the one you can't live without. This is not just a passive hope on their part. They need to believe you're in pain because it validates their false sense of importance. To a narcissist, your suffering is proof of their impact. It's the legacy they want to leave in your life. Emotional chaos, self-doubt, a hole where they used to be. And if they can convince themselves that you're broken without them, it restores their sense of superiority. It gives them that sick satisfaction that even in absence, they still dominate your emotions. They will imagine your silence as torment. They'll think you crying at night, unable to sleep, replaying memories and wondering why you weren't enough. They'll believe you're checking their social media from a burner account, stalking their updates, hanging on to their every move. They want to believe that while they move on, or at least pretend to, you're frozen in time, emotionally paralyzed. This belief helps them feel powerful. It makes them feel like they've still got control, even when you've physically cut the connection. Because if they don't hear from you, they won't interpret that as closure. They'll tell themselves you're simply trying to appear strong, that you're playing a game, that deep down, you're waiting for them to reach out. They won't see your peace. They'll imagine a facade, something fake, something forced. Because if your silence is genuine and healthy, that means they no longer matter. And that truth is too much for their ego to handle. So they choose to believe a lie that protects their delusion of power. They also project their own emotional responses onto you. Narcissists often suffer deeply when they feel abandoned, so they assume you must feel the same. But they forget that your no contact decision wasn't impulsive. It came from pain, reflection, and clarity. They don't acknowledge the months or years of emotional erosion that led you to walk away. In their mind, your decision was rash, and therefore your emotional state must be unstable. They hope you're regretting it, that you're second-guessing everything, that you're on the verge of collapse. Even if you're thriving, they'll refuse to believe it. You could post smiling photos, progress updates, signs of growth, and they'll still convince themselves that it's fake, that you're putting on a show for them. Because if you're truly okay without them, that means they were never as essential as they imagined. And narcissists need to believe they were irreplaceable. Your healing threatens that belief. Your silence, when grounded in peace, is louder than any argument you could ever have. But they'll ignore that reality and continue clinging to the fantasy that you're secretly broken. They will tell mutual friends, if any are left, that you're struggling. They might hint that you're not doing well, that you're bitter, that you'll come around eventually. It's not about facts. It's about feeding their need to be missed. Because to them, your pain equals their power. Your healing, on the other hand, is the one truth they don't want to face. When you go no contact with a narcissist, they hope you're still watching them. They want to believe that even in silence, you're still tuned in, that you're monitoring their every move, that you're lurking on their social media, checking their stories, reading between the lines of every caption. They imagine you as a hidden audience member in the theater of their life, unable to look away. This imagined attention serves a purpose. It keeps their illusion of importance alive, because to a narcissist, being watched means being wanted. It means they still matter. It means they haven't lost control. They will carefully curate their image, not just for the world, but specifically for you. They'll post pictures meant to spark jealousy. Maybe they show off a new partner, a vacation, a sudden burst of happiness they never showed when you were around. They aren't living, they're performing. Everything is done with the assumption that you're paying attention. It's their way of saying, look at what you're missing. Even if they're miserable inside, the illusion matters more than the truth. They want to be the star of your emotional landscape, even after you've left the stage. In their mind, your attention is a sign of weakness. If they think you're watching, it reinforces the belief that you're still emotionally entangled. They don't need a reply, a text, or a call. They just need to believe you see them, that you're still checking in, even if silently. It's their way of staying connected to your energy without putting in the effort of a real relationship. The fantasy that you're still looking gives them the satisfaction of relevance. They see it as proof that their presence lingers, that their power hasn't faded. This belief also justifies their actions. If they think you're watching, they'll use it as a reason to elevate their performance. They might try to appear unbothered, successful, even enlightened, not because they've actually changed, but because they believe the mask is enough. They want you to question your decision, to think, did I give up too soon? So every post, every smile, every calculated glimpse into their world is part of a larger strategy to make you doubt yourself. Even if you've genuinely moved on, they'll assume you haven't. Narcissists don't process loss the way emotionally healthy people do. They don't think in terms of closure. They think in terms of audience retention. They may not reach out, but they expect you to stay emotionally invested. It's the same mindset that drives them to stalk you. Because just as they hope you're watching them, they are most likely watching you too, looking for cracks in your joy, clues that you're still vulnerable. They might not engage directly, but they're checking your stories, reading your posts, and interpreting silence as obsession. Projection is one of their favorite tools. They'll create narratives around your imagined attention. They might tell others they're still watching me. They're still obsessed, even without evidence. Because for them, attention is everything. They don't care if it's love, hate, or curiosity, as long as they're still the focus. They don't see you as a person with your own journey. They see you as a mirror. And they're always checking their reflection, needing to see that they still exist in your world, even if only from the sidelines. So when you go no contact, they don't just hope you're hurting. They hope you're still looking. They want to be your ghost, not haunting out of regret, but out of ego. They want to live rent-free in your mind, believing your silence isn't strength, but suspense. In their reality, you haven't moved on. You're just watching, waiting, and wishing. And that thought, whether true or not, gives them the validation they so desperately crave. When you go no contact with a narcissist, they hope to trigger guilt or doubt in you. They don't accept rejection easily. And rather than confronting the truth of your boundaries, they prefer to manipulate your emotions from a distance. Guilt is one of their favorite weapons, especially because it works best on kind, empathetic people, the very types they often target in the first place. A narcissist doesn't want you to move on with clarity. They want you second-guessing everything. They want you wondering, was I too harsh? Did I overreact? Were they really that bad? That internal conflict is where they regain control, even without speaking a word. After no contact is initiated, they might start telling people their version of the story, painting themselves as the one who was hurt, abandoned, or misunderstood. They'll describe themselves as the victim of your coldness, your silence, your unprovoked decision to cut ties. These aren't just lies. They're carefully crafted narratives meant to travel. They want these stories to reach your ears through mutual friends, family members, or even social media. When you hear that they're confused or struggling, the narcissist is hoping that guilt starts to creep in, not because they actually care how you feel, but because they know guilt weakens your resolve. They'll highlight your empathy and use it against you. If you once cared about their well-being, they count on you still caring. They may act like they've changed or found clarity, suggesting that now would be the perfect time for you to come back and fix what's broken. But this so-called change often has no depth. It's a mask, and behind it is the same manipulation. They don't need you to believe in them forever. They just need you to believe long enough to reopen the door. And guilt is the key they hope will unlock. Even more insidiously, they'll plant seeds of doubt in your memory. They may reach out through indirect means, quotes posted online, cryptic messages, subtle jabs, or coincidental reminders of the past. These are designed to make you romanticize the relationship, to remember the good moments while suppressing the pain. Narcissists are skilled at rewriting history. They rely on selective memories and charm to make you question your own perception. They hope you'll forget the patterns, the manipulation, the emotional toll, and focus only on the potential, the illusion, the few moments that felt real. They know the longer you stay away, the clearer the truth becomes. That's why they act fast, or at least subtly, to destabilize your conviction. Guilt and doubt work silently. They don't scream, they whisper. They twist your thoughts at night, make you scroll through old photos, wonder if they're really the villain or if maybe you overreacted. That's the sweet spot for a narcissist. Not when you hate them. That's still a form of emotional engagement, but when you start questioning your own strength, that's when they see their opportunity. They'll also project their own fear of abandonment onto you. They hope you feel bad for walking away, that you think you gave up too soon, that you could have fixed things, that you didn't try hard enough. But all of this is smoke and mirrors. They don't want resolution. They want reaction. The more emotionally stirred you are, the easier it is for them to twist your boundaries. That guilt they're hoping for is not rooted in love. It's rooted in control. Because if they can make you feel guilty, they don't need to apologize. If they can make you doubt yourself, they never have to change. And if you reach out, they win. Not because you miss them, but because they manipulated your conscience back into submission. When you go no contact with a narcissist, they hope you'll eventually seek closure from them. That desire, that internal longing for understanding is what they count on. Narcissists are masters at leaving confusion in their wake, half-truths, emotional cliffhangers, unfinished arguments, sudden disappearances, or unpredictable behavior. These tactics are not random. They are designed to leave you with unanswered questions, emotional disorientation, and a lingering need to make sense of what happened. They hope that silence will become so loud inside your mind that you come back, not out of love, but in search of clarity. To a narcissist, closure isn't something they give freely. It's something they use like a fishing hook, dangled just out of reach to draw you closer. They want you circling the emotional drain, replaying conversations, analyzing their mixed signals, and trying to decode what was real and what was manipulation. If you left with a heavy heart and a head full of confusion, they see that as a victory. Because as long as you're seeking closure, you're still emotionally invested. You're still in the game. And the game for them is never about resolution. It's about leverage. They may even give you just enough truth to keep you hanging on. A text that says, "I've been thinking," or "we should talk." Not a full explanation, but a spark to ignite your hope for understanding. They know that human beings crave narrative closure. It's part of how we make peace with pain. But narcissists don't want peace, they want power. They give vague answers or partial apologies, not to repair the damage, but to maintain the upper hand. They want you to keep needing something from them, an answer, an apology, a reason, because need equals vulnerability. The closure you're hoping for, they never intend to give it, not fully, because once they give it, you can truly move on. And once you move on, They lose control, so instead they leave the door half open. They hope you'll knock. They hope you'll return with questions. Why did you change? Did you ever love me? Was any of it real? Every question you ask reestablishes their significance in your world. Every moment you spend thinking about the past recharges their sense of superiority. They're not looking to resolve your pain. They're hoping to prolong it just enough to keep you emotionally tethered. They want you to believe that only they have the answers, that your healing depends on their cooperation. And when you start to believe that, you hand them your power all over again, because now they get to decide when or if you get peace. It's a control tactic disguised as a conversation. They may act humble, introspective, even kind for a moment, but it's rarely genuine. Their version of closure often comes with conditions, gaslighting, or emotional bait. I'm sorry you feel that way. I never meant to hurt you, but you weren't easy to love either. They twist closure into confusion and leave you worse than before. What they hope is that your silence is temporary, that eventually your discomfort will drive you back to them, seeking the emotional loose ends they carefully left behind. They rely on your empathy, your need to understand, your deep heart that wants things to make sense. But to a narcissist, clarity is the last thing they want you to have, because clarity sets you free. Closure, real closure, means seeing them without the illusion. And once you see the truth, once you stop needing answers from the person who caused the wounds, their grip is gone. That's the power they fear losing most. When you go no contact with a narcissist, they hope you'll eventually break the silence first. That's their twisted end game. Not necessarily a full-blown return, but a crack in the wall you built. One text, one call, one slip. Because in that moment, they regain the upper hand. Silence threatens their control, and your resistance becomes unbearable for them. They don't like when people walk away without looking back. It challenges their belief that they're irresistible, unforgettable, and permanently influential. So while they may appear unaffected on the surface, underneath, they're watching, waiting, hoping for the day you make the first move. Narcissists aren't wired to respect boundaries. They see them not as lines that should be honored, but as obstacles to overcome. When you go no contact, it's not interpreted as a healthy step forward. It's seen as a challenge, an insult even. It bruises their ego to think they no longer have access to your attention. That access to them is everything. It's not about love or connection. It's about control, validation, and dominance. So they lie in wait, imagining scenarios where you eventually cave in, whether it takes a week, a month, or a year. They count on that moment of weakness. They don't expect you to break the silence in a grand, dramatic way. They'll settle for the smallest crack, a like on a post, a birthday message even, a vague comment on something they said or did. To you, it might feel insignificant, maybe even polite. But to them, it's proof that you haven't let go. It tells them their grip is still intact, even if barely. That's why they often test your silence subtly, sending bait in the form of random messages, fake emergencies, or passive-aggressive posts designed to trigger a reaction. If you bite, even once, they feel victorious. Their silence isn't just absence, it's power. It forces them to sit with themselves, which is something they're not comfortable with. So rather than confront their own flaws or behavior, they fantasize about your eventual return. They imagine that every day of silence is another step toward your inevitable breakdown. They believe no contact is an emotional game you're playing, not a healthy boundary you've established. And because they think you're only pretending to be strong, they wait patiently, strategically. They might not reach out right away because they want to see how long you'll last before you fold. If time passes and you still haven't contacted them, they might grow restless. That's when they start testing your resolve. Maybe they pop up in your life through mutual friends or send a neutral message disguised as concern. They want to see if you'll respond, even politely. The goal isn't reconciliation, it's reassurance. They want to know they still matter. They want to see if you can still be emotionally stirred. If they can get even a hint of reaction, it soothes their bruised ego. That one reply becomes fuel for their delusion that you're not over them, that you can't resist forever. They won't interpret your silence as peace or closure. Instead, they twist it into a temporary phase, something they can eventually undo. That's why they wait for signs of weakness. They believe that the longer they remain on your mental radar, the higher the chance you'll eventually reach out. Not because they miss you, not because they're sorry, but because they need to reestablish control. To them, silence isn't an end, it's a pause. A pause they think you'll eventually break, handing them back the power you took the moment you walked away without saying another word. So now you see, when you go no contact with a narcissist, it's not silence they hear, it's defiance, it's power, it's truth. And that's exactly what they can't stand. They hope you're still watching, still doubting, still hurting, still needing answers, still vulnerable enough to break the silence. But every hope they hold is rooted in control, not care. It's not about love, it's about leverage. But your silence, that's not weakness. That's your healing. That's your freedom. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need closure from the same person who caused the wound. You don't owe a response or reaction or a return. What you owe is peace to yourself. Because when you stay no contact, you don't just walk away from a narcissist, you walk back to your power. And that is what they fear most.